Let's bring in another voice now, and Mmusi Maimane leads the One South Africa movement and joins me now to reflect on the life of the Arch. He says the Arch was a moral giant, a leader and a true reconciler. Mmusi, thank you for your time and good afternoon. So, a moral giant and a true reconciler. Unpack that for me a little bit as we reflect on the life of the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu.
Sure, and just greetings to my fellow South Africans. And I think I send my deepest condolences, obviously, to the family of the Archbishop, to Mama Leah, to the foundation, and certainly to the people of South Africa. You can't deny that Archbishop Tutu played a role, that of midwife to the birthing of our democratic project, in the sense that when many had been calling for revenge and a settling of scores in that way, he called for justice, peace and reconciliation. When it looked like those who were in power ought to abuse that power, whether it was the apartheid government or the democratic government, he spoke truth to that. So to me, and also in my interactions with him personally, always found him such a generous human being, a human being who was willing to go, I may not agree with your position, I may not even support you on some theological points, but I'm willing to share a space with you because, guided by the principle of Ubuntu, I see the divine in you and I see the humanity in you. So the Archbishop, to me, is an incredible giant. We wouldn't today be discussing One South Africa. We wouldn't today be discussing reconciliation had it not been for citizens and like him and the price that he paid for that, for us to be been able to stand on that principle today.
So we will turn to the issues around what One South Africa is about, right? The whole issue around active citizenry, which was a big theme in the life of the late Arch. But we'll do that in a moment. I'd like you to just share with us some of your interactions with the Arch, because, you know, his humanity always stood out and really went before him wherever he went. So if you are able to just share one or two of those interactions that stand out for you.
Firstly, as a young activist, you know, in my early 20s, we were having a dialogue on reconciliation, and I had the brevity enough to invite him, and he came, and he allowed me to interview him just as part of the conversation. And because you were in such a giant South African, with a giant South African, I asked him, I said, Arch, would it be possible for me to take a quick picture with you? And his response was, well, I've never seen a slow one. And it always reminded me just of the sense of humor that the Archbishop had after having had such a conversation on reconciliation. He was able to share light moments. But also at the same time as that, when we faced some very difficult issues for faith communities to grapple with, such as euthanasia and the Dalai Lama, he was forthright. I remember him speaking out about it. And I used to think to myself, here's this Archbishop of such a big faith community speaking up against an injustice, speaking up against such issues. And so every time I interacted with him, we had a great time. I'll never forget the day, even when we spent some time with him and Mama Leah, and wood was being delivered at his house. And, you know, he wasn't one for ceremony. He would say to me, no, let's go collect the wood, bring it into the house. And so, to me, the humility, the grace, but the absolute giant in spirituality. I have never met another human being of that stature, and he's certainly unparalleled in that regard.
That anecdote you share, Mmusi, about wanting to take a quick picture with him and him saying, I've never seen a slow one, I think it just shows the sharp and quick wit that the Arch actually had, because, you know, if you are not paying attention, you would have missed it. You would have missed that. Let's turn to the issue around active citizenry. The Arch made a point of, and in a way, it sort of reminds me, Mmusi, of Martin Luther King's belief that if you see something that's not right, you should say something. And coming back to the Arch, that whole issue of active citizenry became a dominant theme in his life, particularly in as far as preservation of his legacy through the Desmond and Leah Tutu Foundation. You are seeking, in what you are doing with One South Africa movement, and for whatever criticisms politically people can level against you, but I suppose there's no taking away from the importance of an active citizenry. How do we as South Africans, and especially the younger South Africans, emulate that and honor the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu in that way, in carrying forward that active citizenry? It seems to be so hard, Mmusi, sometimes, to even get up and go and vote. Something as basic as saying, you know, let me go and vote as a civil duty. How do we rally people to honor Desmond Tutu by going beyond voting, being active citizens in so many spaces, in so many platforms that they can, and fora that they can use?
Yeah. Look, when we started One South Africa and drew inspiration from people like Archbishop Desmond Tutu, we recognized the fact that those who shape our political futures weren't always all politicians. And certainly Archbishop Tutu was a man of faith and inspired and shaped our country. Secondly, I think that we've always got opportunities in the conversations we have with citizens. You know, active citizenry doesn't always mean going out and doing something, but it's about speaking out. And I think we've got many platforms. We've had more platforms as society today than we've ever had, whether it's on social media, Facebook, or whatever. That when we see racism, we need to speak up against it. That when we see gender-based violence or certainly language that demeans women in our country, we need to be able to be the first ones to speak up against it. And our active citizenry starts in our own homes. You know, one of the things I take away from the life of someone like Archbishop Tutu is the value of Ubuntu, that we cannot see women in this country as slaves, and therefore we need to be able to speak out against that injustice when it occurs. But then lastly, I think in the formations that we have, I think sometimes people think active citizenry is only a political act or getting involved in a political party, whereas there's a great opportunity in our country for faith-based communities, civic society, the judicial commissions, certainly legal minds, to be able to come together and say, we love our country and we'll stand up together. I think more than anything, when I reflect deeply on what equally is going on, is that we are being polarized as a society. And sometimes that is the very essence of the political problem we have in this country, is to divide our country on racial grounds, cultural grounds, regional grounds. Now it's time for citizens to stand up and say, we don't surrender our if you like, our individualism. We don't surrender that to political parties or our agency. We need to stand up and say, when there's an injustice, we'll fight for it. When there's racism, we'll oppose it. Any form of discrimination we'll stand for, because then we will live up to the legacy of someone like Archbishop Tutu and not betrayed at a time that our nation desperately needs it. So to me, one of the work of One South Africa is to say, we have to continue that struggle. We don't have a choice.